It was freezing outside, the wind slicing through every layer of clothing. And there she was, a little girl, no older than 6, shivering in the snow, clutching a small, soggy paper bag. "It's my mom's medicine," she whispered, her tiny voice barely audible over the storm. In that instant, a lonely CEO, used to controlling empires, but untouched by real life, froze. His world, once filled with spreadsheets and boardroom meetings, would never be the same. He saw courage, love, and sacrifice, all wrapped in that trembling child. One choice, one moment of compassion, could change everything, not just for her, but for him too. Witness the heartwarming journey of bravery, selflessness, and the power of showing up when it matters most. Subscribe to the Retold Stories now to experience more tales that touch your heart, heal your soul, and remind us all that love can arrive in the most unexpected moments. Snow had fallen relentlessly over Minneapolis, blanketing the streets and rooftops in a heavy, unbroken white. The wind cut through the city like an invisible knife, rattling street signs and sending paper debris tumbling along the icy sidewalks. The glow from traffic lights shimmered in the swirling flurries, casting faint, wavering reflections on the slick streets below. Most people hurried indoors, wrapped in scarves and coats, eager to escape the relentless cold. Yet, one small figure, no more than 6 years old, moved with determination, a torn paper bag clutched tightly to her chest. Her coat was tattered, pink faded to near gray, and her bare feet pressed against the unforgiving snow. Each step she took was a quiet act of courage, fueled by love and desperation. Inside a black Escalade crawling through the storm, the world was entirely different. The cabin was warm, insulated, almost eerily still. Caleb Whitmore, 45, sat in the back seat, staring out the window with a gaze as vacant as the frozen city outside. His jaw was tight, his brow slightly furrowed, yet his eyes reflected nothing of the world around him. Text messages and missed calls buzzed incessantly, a symphony of obligation he could no longer feel part of. Tonight's gala, speeches, brand reputation, strategic moves, all of it seemed distant, hollow, and insignificant compared to the quiet void within him. He barely noticed the reflection in the window until something stirred, something that would change the rhythm of his life forever. There, in the glow of a dim streetlight, huddled near the curb, was the little girl. At first, she seemed like nothing more than a heap of rags or a discarded bundle of cloth. But when she shifted, her small head rose slightly, revealing glassy, frightened eyes that locked, if only momentarily, with his. Her whisper reached him across the glass. "It's my mom's medicine." Time fractured in that instant. Caleb's heartbeat thundered in his ears, the sterile air of the car suddenly heavy and suffocating. Without conscious thought, he snapped, "Stop the car." The SUV jerked to a halt, tires grinding against the snow-packed asphalt. Caleb opened the door and stepped out, the wind slapping his face like icy whips, snow melting into his hair and coat. Each breath drew in the frozen air, sharp and unforgiving, but his attention was fixed solely on her. The girl trembled violently, shivering uncontrollably, as if the cold itself were trying to push the life from her small body. Caleb knelt beside her, feeling the weight of her frailty, every bone, every shiver pressed into his awareness. He saw the torn bag, the contents barely visible, a small vial of insulin, essential for her mother's survival. Her lips were blue, her eyes wide and glassy, but she clutched that bag as if it were her lifeline. "It's okay," he murmured, almost to himself, wrapping his coat around her tiny frame. She didn't respond, only a weak twitch of her fingers, a silent acknowledgement of his presence. Caleb's instincts, long buried under years of control and calculation, took over. He scooped her into his arms, feeling her feather-light body against his chest, and signaled the driver. "Take us to the nearest ER." Now, inside the SUV, Caleb shielded her as the heater fought in vain against the chill seeping through her thin layers. Her breathing was shallow, fragile, and each blink of her eyes drew a pang of helplessness from him. He whispered to her, words soft, soothing, almost a prayer. "You're going to be all right." But even as he spoke, doubt crept into his mind. How could he be certain? The emergency room at Street Claire's hospital was a stark contrast to the storm outside, bright, sterile, tense with urgency. Caleb sat in a chair just outside Trauma Room 3, hands trembling not from the cold, but from the weight of responsibility suddenly thrust upon him. The nurses moved efficiently, like ghosts, checking vitals, administering blankets, starting IVs. The doctor, calm and precise, handled the situation with a practiced efficiency that left Caleb both awed and helpless. He observed as Maddie, the little girl, was tended to, lying on the hospital bed with an oxygen mask over her face. Her tiny hands still clutched the soggy paper bag. Caleb held his breath, feeling the fragile line between life and death thrum beneath his fingertips. Outside the room, he finally allowed himself to sit, cradling the remnants of her courage. The bag, the sandwich, the slip of paper scribbled with, "For Mom." Don't drop it. Each item a testament to her love, a small beacon of hope in a harsh world. And then, he noticed her fingers twitch, brushing against the sleeve of his coat. Without thinking, Caleb lowered himself into the chair beside her, allowing her grip to anchor him. In that silent moment, amidst the hum of machines and distant footsteps, something shifted. The void inside him, once occupied only by ambition and isolation, began to crack, letting in warmth he had long thought lost. He didn't know her name yet. He didn't know her mother, or if anyone else even cared. But he knew one thing with crystal clarity. He was not walking away. Outside, the snowstorm continued, unabated, relentless and indifferent. Inside, a small, boyish warmth kindled in a man who had once lived only for control, marking the start of a journey defined not by power or wealth, but by presence, courage, and the quiet, unspoken bonds that can grow between strangers in a moment of crisis. After the harrowing journey through the blizzard, Caleb sat quietly in the emergency room, Maddie resting safely in his arms. The cold had leached from her small body, but the tremors of fear and exhaustion lingered. Every time she stirred, every soft breath reminded him of the narrow margin between life and loss. The sterile hospital lights reflected in her wide eyes, catching flecks of frost that had melted only moments before, and Caleb realized that in saving her, he had stepped into a story far larger than his own. The doctors worked efficiently, surrounding Maddie with warmth and care. Caleb remained vigilant, observing every movement, learning the rhythm of her breathing, the subtle shifts in her tiny body. He noticed how she clutched her stuffed bear as if it were a talisman, how her fingers curled around the paper bag that had carried her mother's medicine. Each small detail etched itself into his mind, forming a mental map of her fragile world. When Caleb finally handed her over to the nurses, he didn't release the tension that had gripped him since seeing her in the snow. Watching Maddie carefully placed on the hospital bed, surrounded by machines and monitors, he felt a surge of protectiveness unlike anything he had ever known. In that moment, he understood the difference between observing life from a distance and being responsible for it, fully and irrevocably. Over the next few hours, Caleb moved almost instinctively, learning what she liked, what comforted her. He fetched blankets, adjusted pillows, whispered soft reassurances. Maddie, exhausted but attentive, responded in small gestures, eyes flicking toward him, a faint smile, a gentle squeeze of his sleeve. She did not speak much. Words were scarce for a child on the brink of trauma and hypothermia, but the bond forming between them was unspoken, yet profound. He learned about her mother, Jenna, through fragments of conversation and whispered notes from the nurses. Jenna had been ill, overworked, and without proper support. She had lost her job, medical coverage, and yet, even in her weakened state, had inspired Maddie to take action. Caleb felt the weight of this realization. The girl's bravery, born of love and necessity, contrasted sharply with the hollow privilege of his own life. He had never been tested by urgency, by moral stakes this high. As Maddie rested, Caleb began to see the patterns of her life, the sketches taped to the walls, the small, imperfect toys arranged around the bed. Each drawing, each careful placement, told a story of survival, resilience, and longing for safety. The girl was not simply surviving the cold and illness. She was fighting to preserve a sense of family, of care, in a world that had neglected her. Caleb recognized a parallel in his own life. He had built empires but neglected the human connection that truly matters. The first night passed with quiet tension. Caleb stayed beside her bed, seated on a stiff hospital chair, his coat draped over both of them for warmth. He did not sleep. His mind raced not with corporate strategy, but with questions about responsibility, care, and morality. Each time Maddie twitched or murmured in her sleep, he instinctively reached out, smoothing her hair, adjusting her blanket. She clung to him, not just for warmth, but for the assurance that someone would not abandon her. By morning, Maddie stirred with tentative awareness. Her eyes opened slowly, scanning the room before locking onto Caleb. "Where's my mom?" she whispered, her voice small, fragile. Caleb crouched, voice gentle. "She's safe now, resting. And I'll help make sure she gets all the care she needs." The trust in her gaze, even tentative, filled him with a strange, unfamiliar warmth. In those early hours, a silent covenant was formed. Caleb would stay, not out of obligation, but because he understood that presence, sustained and unwavering, was the gift this child needed most. As the days unfolded, Caleb's role deepened. He learned her routines, what comforted her after nightmares, how she liked her cocoa, the way she arranged her toys. He read to her, sat quietly during her naps, and even brought small, thoughtful gifts, coloring books, chocolate muffins, scarves he jokingly claimed were magical and snow-proof. Maddie's laughter, initially rare and tentative, became a gentle echo through the sterile corridors, and Caleb felt a stirring within himself, a sense of fulfillment he had long thought impossible. The connection between them was not instant. It was nurtured in small, deliberate acts. A touch of the hand, a soft-spoken word, a shared moment of quiet. Each gesture reinforced trust, safety, and the sense that someone genuinely cared. Caleb, once a man defined by control and calculation, was now learning the subtle language of empathy and attachment, a language that required patience and vulnerability. Jenna's recovery progressed slowly, but steadily. Caleb kept a careful distance, allowing the mother and daughter to rebuild their connection while subtly reinforcing a protective presence. Maddie's eyes would light up when she saw him, her small hand finding his sleeve, and in that gesture he found a new purpose. He was not there to replace a father, not yet. He was there to ensure survival, comfort, and a sense of safety. One afternoon, the walls of Maddie's room transformed into a gallery of her creativity drawings, taped to pale blue paint, depicting sunlit houses, stick figures with smiling faces, and always three central figures: a tall man with broad shoulders, a woman in pink, and a small girl holding a lunch bag. Caleb studied these images with quiet amazement. Each one was a testament to her observations, her interpretations, and her growing trust in his presence. He realized that, through these small symbols, she was acknowledging him as part of the fragile yet burgeoning family unit she craved. Caleb spent hours beside her, reading, laughing, sometimes simply observing. The hospital room became a sanctuary, a space where a child's fear was met with unwavering attention, where quiet acts of care replaced corporate negotiations and financial transactions. The walls of white, harsh, and sterile were softened by crayons, laughter, and the steadfast presence of a man learning to care without expectation, a man whose life had been redefined by the courage of a small girl. Through this process, Caleb discovered that compassion could not be measured in spreadsheets or balance sheets. It was in the warmth of his coat wrapped around her trembling body, in the patience to read the same story repeatedly, in the willingness to endure sleepless nights, worrying silently yet remaining steadfast. The bond was no longer simply about saving a life. It was about building trust, nurturing hope, and being present when it mattered most. And so, as Maddie's strength returned, the once cold, detached CEO had begun to awaken in ways he never imagined possible. He learned that love is not inherited, earned, or documented, it is demonstrated, shown through small acts that ripple outward, transforming lives quietly yet profoundly. In saving Maddie, he had inadvertently saved a part of himself long thought lost, a part that remembered warmth, connection, and the irreplaceable power of being there when it truly counts. The quiet rhythm Caleb had established with Maddie and her mother was shattered one afternoon by a sudden, unexpected intrusion. A legal notice had arrived, claiming that Travis Monroe, Maddie's biological father, was petitioning for temporary custody. Caleb read the document twice, each line amplifying a tight knot in his chest. Travis had been absent for years, uninvolved, yet now sought to assert rights that had long been dormant. The timing, coinciding with the media attention around Caleb's heroic actions, was no coincidence. The sudden threat was a stark reminder that life's challenges do not pause for heroism or compassion. The next morning, Caleb arrived at the hospital early, determined to remain present while preparing for the confrontation. Maddie slept peacefully under a new blanket, her cheeks pink, her stuffed bear clasped tightly in her hands. The drawings on the walls had multiplied stick figures, crayon sunsets, and homes bathed in golden light. They were small, tender symbols of hope, resilience, and the burgeoning sense of family that had taken root in the hospital room. In the conference lounge, Caleb met Travis for the first time. The man was polished, confident, a striking contrast to the quiet resolve Caleb had developed in recent days. With a sharp smile, Travis extended a hand. Caleb did not reciprocate. The tension was palpable, not merely between two men, but between two fundamentally different approaches to responsibility and care. "You left," Caleb said evenly. "You abandoned her. Now because someone else showed up, you want to claim what you never nurtured." Travis attempted to explain, citing concern for Maddie's mother and their child's welfare. Caleb listened, unmoved. The court could debate legality, but Caleb's priority was ensuring Maddie's safety and emotional stability. His presence in her life was already more significant than Travis's absence could ever erase. The courtroom was stark and sterile, devoid of warmth or sentiment, yet within its walls, the stakes were immense. Judges, attorneys, social workers all became part of the intricate balance between law and human experience. Monica Raines, Caleb's seasoned attorney, approached with quiet authority, presenting evidence of Travis's prolonged absence and lack of meaningful engagement in Maddie's life. She highlighted Caleb's consistent presence, his role in ensuring both Maddie and her mother received care, and the trust and attachment that had formed between him and the child. Jenna spoke for the first time during the proceedings. Her voice was soft but steady. "He didn't leave," she said, referring to Caleb. "Not when I was sick, not when the cameras came. Not even when Travis disappeared. He stayed. He showed up when it mattered." Her words were simple, yet they carried the weight of months of struggle, fear, and recovery. They were more persuasive than legal arguments alone could ever be. Maddie, guided gently by the child advocate, took her place beside the bench. Her small hand held tightly to her bear, she faced the adult world with a cautious awareness. Yet there was trust in her gaze as it fell on Caleb. Every act, every gesture, every night spent reading stories, bringing cocoa, and offering quiet comfort had culminated in this moment. The court was not only weighing legal rights but witnessing the tangible proof of love, care, and presence. The judge listened intently as both sides presented their case. Travis emphasized his biological connection, his desire to do right by his daughter, yet the evidence of absence and neglect was glaring. Caleb's attorney countered with details of the child's routines, the support system Caleb had created, and the unbroken presence that had ensured Maddie's physical and emotional safety. Hours passed, with careful deliberation. Caleb sat beside Maddie, who leaned gently against his arm, her small presence, a grounding force amidst the tension. He reflected on the journey they had shared, from the icy streets of Minneapolis to the warmth of hospital care, from moments of fear and uncertainty to the formation of trust and connection. Each act of quiet compassion had fortified their bond, creating a foundation stronger than any legal claim. When the ruling was finally delivered, it was a testament to the power of consistent, compassionate presence. Travis maintained legal paternity, but his prolonged absence and lack of meaningful participation rendered his petition for full custody unsupported by evidence. Physical custody remained with Jenna, and Caleb was granted legal guardianship in case of emergency, along with full visitation rights. The decision balanced law with human reality, acknowledging that love and care often outweigh mere biological ties. Relief washed over the room in quiet waves. Maddie moved instantly, running into Caleb's arms, pressing her tiny face against his chest. "You didn't let them take me," she whispered. Caleb held her tightly. "Never," he replied. "Not a chance." Jenna stepped forward, eyes glossy but clear, and placed her hand on Caleb's shoulder. "Thank you for being here," she said softly. "You belong here too." The weeks that followed were quiet, but filled with a new rhythm. Caleb remained a constant in Maddie and Jenna's lives, attending to small details, sharing in daily routines, and nurturing the fragile threads of family they were weaving together. Together they built a life defined not by titles or obligations, but by presence, patience, and love that required no formal acknowledgement, only care. Caleb discovered joy in unexpected places, reading bedtime stories, helping Maddie color her drawings, listening to her laugh at the simplest jokes, and witnessing her grow stronger each day. Jenna, once weak and exhausted, regained health and hope, supported by a man whose devotion had transformed from an act of heroism to a quiet, enduring partnership. By the time Christmas approached, their bond was unshakable. The small cabin outside Minneapolis radiated warmth, decorated with hand-drawn ornaments, string lights, and a soft hum of holiday music. Maddie sat cross-legged by the tree, her eyes sparkling with excitement as she carefully placed her first family ornament, featuring herself, her mother, and Caleb. "We don't have to wish for family anymore," she whispered. "We built one." Caleb's heart swelled. The world he had once measured in profits, status, and control had been replaced with something immeasurable: love, connection, and the knowledge that showing up, staying, and caring mattered more than any title or legal claim ever could. He had learned that true triumph lies not in power, but in presence and in the courage to remain when it is hardest. And in that quiet, snowy cabin, with the fire crackling and the scent of cocoa in the air, the small family, Maddie, Jenna, and Caleb, experienced a profound, transformative truth: that love does not require obligation, that care does not require blood, and that sometimes the greatest victories are measured not by law, but by the hearts we touch and the lives we hold steady when the storm passes. In the quiet aftermath of the storm, a new rhythm settled over their lives. The snow outside glistened under the morning sun, untouched, pristine, as if mirroring the fresh start they had carved together. Maddie, curled up with her patched teddy bear, looked up at Caleb and Jenna with eyes full of trust, hope, and unspoken gratitude. She no longer needed to carry the weight of fear and responsibility on her small shoulders. Someone had shown up, someone had stayed, and in doing so, had transformed everything. Caleb, once a man defined by spreadsheets and boardroom conquests, had discovered a deeper, more enduring power: the power of presence. Every story read aloud, every warm blanket tucked around Maddie, every quiet moment of watching over her as she slept, had reshaped his understanding of life. He realized that success is not measured in wealth or influence, but in the lives we touch and the hearts we nurture. Through Maddie and Jenna, he learned that love, compassion, and steadfast presence are the most profound legacies one can leave behind. Jenna, now recovering steadily, exuded a strength that was both quiet and fierce. She had been fragile, exhausted, and at the mercy of circumstance. Yet with Caleb's unwavering support, she could breathe, hope, and care for her daughter without fear. Their bond, though unconventional at first, had become a sanctuary of trust, warmth, and mutual respect. Together, they experienced the small joys that make life extraordinary. The laughter over spilled cocoa, the careful placing of crayons on paper, the creation of ornaments and drawings that symbolized their new family, and the shared warmth of a home filled with light and love. These were victories of a kind that could not be measured, only felt. Caleb understood that what he had done was more than heroism in a fleeting moment. It was a commitment to being there when it mattered most. The child who had run through the snow to save her mother had, in turn, saved him from a life of isolation, showing him the profound impact of choosing to care. Presence, patience, and love had built something stronger than legal documents, wealth, or status. They had built a family. And so, as the fire crackled, and snow continued to fall softly outside, a truth settled over them. Family is not always defined by blood or title, but by who shows up, who stays, and who refuses to walk away. The moments that matter most are not grand gestures, but the consistent acts of care, attention, and love that weave lives together quietly, yet indelibly. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminds you of the power of showing up and staying when it matters most, then subscribe to the Retold Stories. Join us for more tales that heal, inspire, and remind us that love often arrives in the most unexpected moments, and that even on the coldest, darkest days, warmth, hope, and family can always be found when someone chooses to stay.